Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our meetings of the Finance, Buildings and Grounds and Finance Committee meetings. Would everyone please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome everyone out. Glad everyone can join us virtually. We're hoping everyone's safe in the snow, and one of the topics we'll talk about tonight. And we'll start with the Finance Committee. Oh, hold on. Education Committee, sorry. Start with the Education Committee. Mrs. Morris.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few updates this evening. Dr. Bridgman, the high school administrative team, including our directors and our assistant directors, have been continuing to meet throughout the past few weeks to discuss and plan for the possible return of students to the high school full-time. The team has also been collaborating with teachers and staff members in this regard to garner their thoughts, their feedback, and their suggestions for consideration. At this point, topics and considerations are being discussed that include informal feedback that we have been receiving from parents in regard to the full-time return of the students. It's mixed. We're hearing some parents say they want the students back. We're hearing some students say, some parents saying that they're a little hesitant. So we are right now considering polling the parents to ascertain their individual preferences for their own children. We are currently looking at several different models. One model that we are looking at is a 4-day model with 1 day being remote. Students would come to school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday would be a remote day initially. And then at some point we would hope to transition to 5 full days. We are also looking at a schedule in which students attend school 4 days a week on a rotating basis. So 4 days a week, we have only 3 grade levels there, and there's just 1 day a week where we have the 4 grade levels there to sort of cut down on the density in the building. No matter what the model, the gradual transition of bringing 1 grade level back at a time is ever present. It comes up in all of our conversations, as is starting with the senior class at some point in March or April when and if a decision is made to do so. We are also considering a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks between the phase-in of each grade level. So when we bring the seniors back, we would look for 2 to 3 weeks to see how things are going, to make any necessary adjustments before we would then bring the next grade level back. We are looking at classroom density, making sure that our classroom sizes fit the number of students that we have enrolled in each class and that we can keep students safe and socially distanced. We will be looking to distance desks a minimum of 3 feet to a maximum of 6 feet. We have identified several classes across the different subject areas that we have to look at more closely, and that is something that the high school team continues to work on. One consideration that does continue to be brought up in discussion is the fact that when most of our students return full-time, there will be a few number of students that will still be remote, and what type of challenge that will be for teachers in the classroom to have, let's say, 20 some odd students in front of them and 1 or 2 students remote at home. We want to make sure that everyone is getting the quality education that they deserve. So that is another topic that is being discussed as a little bit of one of our challenges. The logistics of social distancing and safe eating at the lunch periods is being worked through. We have taken the square footage of the cafeterias, the number of students in each lunch period, figured it out. We can fit at a distance of approximately 3 feet with desk shields, all of our students right now into the cafeterias at a safe distance. And we are also looking into the possibility of putting picnic tables in the courtyard and desks in the lobby area outside of the auditorium to just allow a little bit more room in those cafeterias if it's necessary. But again, that is something that the high school team is looking into. Transitioning between periods and congestion in some areas, especially the hallways where they cross and intersect, is something that the high school team is also looking at. We want to make sure that during the passing of classes, our students and our staff are safe. So we're looking at different traffic patterns in the high school and figuring that out as well. Safety measures will be kept in place. I'm very happy to report that we did order 2,500 sneeze guards and have them delivered already. So they are at the high school ready to go. We just have to work out with Buildings and Grounds when those desk shields can be installed. We also talked with Buildings and Grounds in relation to the creation and installation of plexiglass partitions in certain classrooms, such as the art room and the technology rooms. Because of the way those rooms are set up, they aren't individual desks. So we would be looking for Mr. Bossi to work his magic with his crew and come up with some plexiglass partitions for us. So I did provide him with updated information in that regard on Friday. We placed orders for face and instrument shields for our music and our auto shop classes. So they have been ordered. There are special masks that students can utilize while they are singing, while they are playing instruments. And there are even special masks that can go over some of the instruments to help keep us safe. Masks will obviously be worn by all students, staff, and visitors to the building at all times. That is currently happening. We will be keeping the windows open, which is currently happening, keeping our desks separated 3 to 6 feet, sanitizing the building, and any other thing that comes up throughout the course of our conversations, we will be keeping on the list. One other consideration is in regard to the vaccine distribution timeline. We have heard some concern expressed about the full-time return of students prior to all stakeholders having the opportunity to be vaccinated. So that's something that the district continues to look into as well. And I know that Dr. Bridgman and the high school team were supposed to meet and get some feedback from the teachers. I believe it was yesterday. Obviously, because of the snow, they couldn't do that. So that will take place at some point this week. And I will be meeting with the high school team again tomorrow just to see where we are in regard to some of these issues that I shared with you this evening.
So I guess the question is, you know, as Dawn pointed, Mrs. Morrison pointed out earlier, we have many people that have reached out to say we need to get these kids back, mostly from the socio-emotional perspective. The concern about the curriculum piece of it, of course, it's important, but I think at this point, most people realize that that's something that can be addressed later if we needed to. But right now, we do have a number of students that are struggling with anxiety and depression and what have you. A number have gone out since September with diagnosed conditions. So they have gone full remote. But within the last few weeks, we have gotten the exact opposite from parents saying, my child is stressed and depressed and anxious. They need to be back in the setting full time, which as practitioners, we all know that a child that is struggling with anxiety and depression, more often than not, way more often than not, they are better off in the school setting than not. So we're seeing that converse now, which is interesting because it hadn't come up since September, but now we do have people coming with medical documentation saying the student needs to be in the school setting. Of course, the question is, there are considerations, you know, our staff would love to have the vaccine. We've been looking into that. There is an urgent care on the island that is partnering with school districts. I have reached out to them, but they have been very clear that they do not anticipate being able to support districts for 2 to 4 months. And it all depends on the vaccine release, and we all know that as well. For that time, we'll be out of school. Sorry, Amory?
I could just ask, do you have any data on what the percentage of our staff have successfully managed to get appointments for vaccines, start their vaccine? Do you have any data like that?
No, but I worked on a Google form yesterday to elicit exactly that information because I think we need to know who is vaccinated and who isn't. So that should be going out probably early next week.
Thanks.
So, you know, there's a lot of variations on this. Do we bring everybody back? Do we, you know, we've tried to right now we have at the high school hybrid and remote. Do we look to go to 3 different models? Do we look to just say all or none? I mean, you know, it's a conundrum.
So Dawn, the plan as discussed is going to phase them back, whatever the date is. Say it's March 1st, seniors come back, see how that goes. You said maybe 2 to 3 weeks, then juniors, then 2 to 3 weeks, and go that way. So potentially
That's where we are leaning at this point, that it would be a gradual transition back so that we're able to assess how things are going, make any changes that need to be made, and then bring the next class safely back.
Right, but total number, could we be full back? I mean, does that make sense from the distancing, masking, or is that gonna be tight?
It would be tight, but there are people that are choosing to stay remote, of course, and there are medical vulnerabilities there, and if they're medically vulnerable with half size, certainly we wouldn't look to bring them back when we're back full time.
Right.
We have managed to do this in the middle schools, in those buildings, and it's all in the planning, certainly. The question is, do we bring back you know, we could say all of the seniors first, and then whatever group, whether it's the juniors or the freshmen,
Right.
or whatever. Do we seek to bring everyone back, or do we seek to stay hybrid? No matter what, any teacher in the group will tell you it is very difficult to manage a classroom of students sitting in front of you and try to manage that camera at the same time. We're doing it to the best of our ability, but we don't want to lose sight of the kids that are in front of us, nor the kids behind the camera. So that's really the struggle we're having right now.
And I think flexibility in regard to the dates is going to be key, because everything will be tentative based off of how our initial phase in of the first class goes.
Dawn, what's like the maximum amount of kids in the average classroom will be?
Right now, we have some classes that have 27, 28 students in them. So we're looking at that, and we're seeing if we could possibly move them to larger classrooms where there's more room to spread out. That's what Dr. Bridgman and the high school staff is working on right now. I would say in each subject area, there's probably about 4 or 5 classes in a situation like that.
Class sizes at the high school, if I had to guess, are on the average the lowest probably in the district, except for some of our primary grades. But there are, as Dawn points out, anomalies in every single solitary subject, particularly in English and social studies, a few math. Science is capped at 24, and those classes are high, and that cannot be in the classrooms in which some of them are currently placed.
What's the distance between the students in those situations?
Right now, the distance is 6 feet. When we come back, we would look to have a minimum of 3 feet.
So in a classroom where there's 27 students, if there were, what would we be talking about?
3 feet,
3 feet. With the desk shields and the masks.
correct.
Is
And
there
the
any,
windows open so that the air can circulate.
is there any other ventilation devices that we could bring in for halls or lunchrooms that we would need? Is there anything?
We don't want any, the common wisdom is not to have the types of fans or something that are going to be blowing the air around. If somebody sneezes or coughs or whatever, they're simply moving around the germs. We'd really rather move the rooms and use a bigger venue, which is what I think probably most districts have done, is to move those rooms. We could do some balancing of classes. We do have some sections running at the same period where there are class sizes under 10 and class sizes over 25. Things happen over the course of a semester where kids come and go and, you know, whatever. So we're looking to do a little balancing there. But I can say that Mrs. Morrison and the team have put in countless hours to really see what we can do. We know people are anxious, but to her point, you know, when we brought the elementary and middle school back in September, we waited a full 3 weeks. The first week we just assessed. The second week we made some changes. The third week we assessed the changes. And that's really what we would have to do in this case as well. But I guess one of the questions, because Dawn, you made the suggestion, should we poll people and see what we're really dealing with number wise? I mean, if more than half of people feel like they'd rather stay in the hybrid model, then you know, maybe that's where we need to be for the rest of the year. But I do know that there are many anxious people to get their children back full time as well. And those are the ones that are speaking out right now, of course, because those are the ones that aren't in the place where they need to be.
I think a survey makes sense. You know,
Yeah, I would do a poll. I don't want to get into it. I would probably keep it simple. You know, what would you think, you know, Mr. McCann, what would you like your daughter to be, you know?
Right. That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, because I think that there's probably a lot more parents that aren't saying something right, you know, that have strong feelings one way or the other.
Yes.
But I know I certainly have heard from a lot of people with concerns about their child's mental emotional state.
Yes.
So I think it's, you know, definitely an issue that we need to try to contend with.
Polling is probably a great way to start. And like you said, Ms. Burns, it just gives us a better idea as to what we're looking at and how many really want to come back versus who doesn't.
Okay, Mrs. Morrison, so maybe you and I can work on that.
Absolutely.
And we'll keep it simple, but we'll just get a sense of really what we're dealing with. You know, if only half of, and here's the thing, if half want to come back and half want to remain in hybrid, it would be terrific. And it would be manageable to bring everyone back that wants to be there full time. But then it goes back to running those classes maybe 3/4 full, and you still need to address the 6 or 7 students that are on the other side of the camera. And that's the challenge, to make sure that no child is left behind.
Any chance we could get someone to be a complete virtual teacher? Do we have enough staffing for that, or?
We don't, we would have to hire, but the bigger problem with that is we have so many singletons in our high school. You know, maybe for like we did at the middle school level, but we had so few remote students, we could do it for the common classes, English 9, 10, 11, you know, social studies 9, 10, 11. But when you start, you know, you've got an honors here, you've got an AP here, you've got, you know, it just becomes cumbersome. So it's
Sure.
just unfortunately not practical.
Well, I also just want to take a minute and acknowledge the amount of work that everyone from central admin to teachers to building and grounds is really putting into this. And people need to remember that they're also maintaining school that's currently going on as well. So I just want to say, you know, I want to tip my cap to everyone and just say that you guys, I know how hard you're all working. And I just want to acknowledge it because too many people don't really understand what's going in to not only try to make these constant changes, but also maintain what also is going on. So I just want to, you know, say great job to everybody and just really, you know, we're out, at least a lot of us that I talk to are there thinking about you guys and all the work that you're putting in.
Are we comfortable moving on to the next item on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. At a
Sorry,
recent-
sorry, Mrs. Morrison. I'm nodding because I'm on my third computer of the night, which doesn't have a camera, and
Okay.
now I have to realize that nodding is not going to work. So yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So at a recent curriculum council meeting, the community service hours required for graduating seniors to complete in order to receive the seal on their diploma indicating such was discussed in relation to the decreased ability for students to be out and about during this COVID time since last March. Board policy 7224 currently requires seniors to have completed 100 or more hours of community service while in high school to earn the seal on their diploma. Due to the impact of COVID-19, the following adjustments are proposed for the minimum of required community service hours. For the class of 2021, it would be 70 hours. For the class of 2022, it would be 70 hours. For the class of 2023, 75 hours. And for the class of 2024, 85 hours. If you look at the chart that was provided in the agenda, It really just accounts for last year and this year, a decreased number of hours, taking into account that our students have not had all of the abilities and the opportunities that they've had in the past to get out there and do all the great things that they do.
Yeah, I just had this discussion around the kitchen table about community service hours and what options are available. So I think practicality makes sense.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So it's going to involve a board change, a motion on the agenda on Thursday night, because we do need, it's a board policy, so we have to approve the change for the year, for the 4 years,
That's-
actually.
Yep, that's fine.
The extensive renovations to the planetarium at the high school are complete. As of yesterday, students now have access to the state-of-the-art facility that includes a hemispheric dome onto which stars, planets, and other objects can be projected. The planetarium will be utilized to provide students with educational experiences related to astronomy and other areas in science. 2 high school teachers, Mr. Vitti and Mr. Ruggiero, were recently trained on how to operate the planetarium and are looking forward to utilizing it with the students. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Education, Mrs. Burns, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Bassi, Mrs. Fulton, Mrs. Langone, and so many other teachers and staff members at the high school that made the renovations of this planetarium possible. It's really going to be great for our students. Some of us had an opportunity to visit the planetarium in the last few weeks, and we're really looking forward to the students getting in there.
It's gorgeous. You did a really amazing job. I couldn't even be more happier. Only if the pool can go that way, James, then I'd really be happy.
Hopefully when COVID is behind us, we can start doing some evening sessions for community members like we've done in the recent past. I think that would be great. And, you know,
I think it would be great to show, you know, all of the work that we've done,
Yeah.
especially at high school, the newest things.
Agreed. I
So,
think we need an open house for the new technology rooms as well.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
the music suite.
Yep.
I would echo that. Thanks to everyone involved from the board prior to this, recognizing that was a necessity. And the amazing part about it, I was talking to some of the people there, there's only like 3 or 4 planetariums in high schools across Long Island.
I think it's 4. Yeah.
So it's proud that we're part of that, and it really came out magnificent.
And the last thing on the agenda is on January 25th, the Education Department released a request for public comments related to the administration of elementary, middle school, and high school state testing and accountability requirements for the current school year. The first waiver seeks to waive all state testing requirements for the year. And the second waiver seeks to eliminate the requirements to assign levels to accountability subgroups or identify schools in need of improvement for the 2021 school year. Public comments related to the waivers will be accepted through Friday, February 5th, and then NYSED will be proposing to the Board of Regents that it adopt the amendments to Commissioner's regulations to implement them. So it's looking like we are heading in the direction of those state exams being waived for the current school year. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Morrison.
Thank you.
Mrs. Morrison, just one question. I know I believe I got the postcard home for enrollment for pre-K.
Yes.
We're looking to run the full pre-K program next year, and what are the dates and enrollment in that? Just to get up?
Enrollment is for the entire month of February. It started February 1st. It runs through the end of the month. And yes, we are looking to run our pre-K program for next year.
Great.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Mrs. Pilati.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. In our finance agenda this month, we have our treasurer's report for our school district funds as well as our extracurricular funds for the month of December. We also have our January payroll summary in tab 2. Our financial statements are as of December. We have an internal claims audit report from Pat for the month of January. And there were no changes in the system Envision. So Joe put in his memo that there were no changes for the month of January. We had payroll certifications for January 8th and January 22nd. Our warrants are attached, and on the agenda for Thursday night, there are the resolutions for the approval of budget transfers for the month, as well as some surplus damage calculators, and the special education contract for 2020-21 for Half Hollow Hills School District.
What happened to the calculators? That's a lot of calculators.
It is. I don't have the detail, but I do have a memo from Mr. Grover, so I can let you know if you want on Thursday night.
They were damaged, so I'd be curious.
Okay.
Mrs. Pilati, you know what, my packet unfortunately is in the office, so I'm not sure what it says. But I do know, Mr. McGinnis, that some of them, the graphic calculators, the old ones that we were using, they did not really wear well or weather the storm, because don't forget the kids get them back and forth. So we'll double check, but I'm going to suspect it's probably something related to that. We're going a different route now with those calculators.
Okay. We had one discussion item for tonight. As you may recall, at the audit committee meeting that we just had with our internal auditors, that's Cullen and Danowski, they met with the audit committee to discuss their area of testing. So they did their overall risk assessment and then discussed which area they thought they might test going forward for this school year. And initially they had suggested special education, as that hasn't been tested in many years. While we do agree, and we would like to do special education possibly next year, we were looking to suggest that they do extra classroom this year, as that hasn't been tested since 2010. And we also had a transition to a new treasurer. We had Vicki Newell in the treasurer position previously. Kelly Seppi has now taken over for over a year now, and we think this is a good area for them to test for this school year. We just wanted to make sure before they issued the engagement letter that there weren't any concerns with that area.
The only question I would have is, last time with the special education, we were able to find improvements that helped. Is that a more likely area where we'd find improvements, or do you think everything's going smooth there and it could be more, a testing area?
Yeah, I think everything is going very smoothly in both areas. And if you're ever looking to potentially affect, from a financial perspective, special ed is a good area to test, of course, but extra classroom does touch so many different, there's so many different groups and so many different clubs and counselors. So it's always good to get a handle on that as well. So I think they're both worth testing. I think we just wanted to push special ed off for 1 year.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no concerns, then I can let them know that they can issue the engagement letter with that area. And I believe you wanted me to just touch on one other thing. I just wanted to mention, as you might recall, in the state aid projections last year, what the state did with the pandemic was they took some of our funding away from a state level. They called it a pandemic adjustment. And then they reissued it to us in the form of this CARES Act. It's a CARES adjustment. So while they said, okay, for us, West Islip, we were going to be reduced by $215,000, they said, oh, you'll get it back as federal dollars. I just wanted to point out that we haven't gotten it back yet. We did actually have to apply. It's in the form of a grant. And as Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Burns can attest, we had to do a lot of legwork to get that application going, because there's a big non-public piece that's involved. So we did get notification that they unsubmitted our application. However, I think there is just confusion with the state. I did speak with the director before we submitted, and essentially it's treated similarly to the way we do our Title I schools. So we have about 160 students that go to non-public schools. With the CARES Act, we have to look at where our Title I schools are and look at the students who live in those catchment areas. And we would only reach out to the non-public schools where those students attend. So there happened to be, I would say, about 17 different non-public schools in total. However, Okwanock and Udall were our Title I schools at the time. And there was only 5 non-public schools that were affected. So I did get clarification from this from the director at SED, and I have that all in writing. So I have a Zoom call set up for tomorrow to just confirm with them that we did receive direct guidance directly from them, that we were only supposed to reach out to these 5 non-publics. So hopefully that will be cleared up. But I just wanted to show that getting this money is just not always so simple as, you know, they do the adjustment and say, oh, you'll get it as a federal funding, but they do make you jump through some hoops.
Okay, so assuming that we get that money back, what happens the year after? Is the state going to restore that money, or are we then going to be out the money because the federal money is a one-shot deal?
Yeah, that was my question.
Right. I think we're in a similar situation this year. If if on that analysis I had provided to the board, this year we are in a similar situation where we're looking at another adjustment to our aid. They just called it something different this year. It was called the COVID-19 supplemental stimulus. So the same idea, they're looking to take away state money and fill it with federal dollars. And I have the same question you do. It's all well and good, but until the federal funding potentially runs out one year. So
it'll probably be the same for this year with the new stimulus package that's targeting schools. They'll probably look to give it back to us the same way that you're doing it now. So
right. And this year,
take copies of what you do.
This year, last year it was 215,000. This year we are looking, as of course, this is just the first run from the governor, at 3.7 million. So it increased significantly for us.
Yeah,
just wanted
the increase, you mean the cut increased significantly?
That's correct. So last year, our pandemic adjustment, and then in return, they plugged it with the federal money, which we're applying for right now, the CARES, was only 215,000. It wasn't very significant.
Right.
And thankfully, we didn't have to share any of that with any non-public schools.
Right.
Going forward, I don't know what the parameters are going to be surrounding that. It hasn't been disclosed yet, but that federal COVID-19 stimulus money is, for us, that adjustment is 3.7 million this year so far.
And you're working that into next year's budget, or is that impacting us in a way that is going to be?
Well, I'm similar to last year. It's a wash because it was an in and an out. So it didn't really affect us because, again, we were assuming we would be made whole by the federal dollars. So I think it's too early right now to tell, but as of right now, with my first run, I am including it as a wash, that it would be a hole from the state level, but it would be filled from the federal level.
So they're calling it the new name where it used to be the gap elimination adjustment.
Right.
Now it's going to be the local district adjustment.
Yes.
But like I said, with the other thing, the real question is not what happens in year 1, it's what happens in year 2, 3, and 4. Because
exactly.
as we all remember, it took us about 7-8 years to get whole on GEA.
Yep.
And of course, we never got that money back, but that's what it took us that long to get back to where we were to begin with.
Right, but Elisa's saying that she believes that it's a give and take right away. It's take and
No.
give, I should say.
You're not following me.
Yeah.
I follow you.
It's give. No, you don't. It's give and take for year 1.
Right.
Okay. The year after that. Okay. Shake your head because you don't understand. Continue not understanding, and ittle be fine. No problem.
You are so condescending. It's
Okay.
ridiculous.
No worries. No worries. You understand. I got it.
So today, when we had our CARES package bounced back to us. And what they do is they itemize, so to speak, the elements that we need to revisit. And Mrs. Pilati had already reached out to the State Ed Department to ensure that we were on the right track as far as sharing the funding with the privates. And those were those schools with whom we have, kids that fulfill the criteria. But they listed a slew of other private schools that we might have maybe 1 or 2 children attending outside of Suffolk County, on the East End, or whatever the case may be. So we need to go back over the next few days and determine whether in fact those schools are eligible for our funding as well. So go ahead, Elisa.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Burns. I just wanted to add that I actually did that in the first round of the analysis. I looked at all 160 students, where they live, their address, and I verified with SED, that it would only be those 5. So I think they might just be picking up that we have 160 students attending 17 different schools, not realizing that I've already verified their addresses. I'm hoping it's going to be as simple as that tomorrow. But like I said, I do have a call tomorrow to clear it up. So hopefully it will be submitted again quickly. That was it, sorry. That's all I had. If anyone had any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Pilati.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Bossy.
Hello and good evening. I have the agenda in front of me. I assume you're all looking at the same one that I have here. The first topic is the bond Smart Schools Capital Reserve. We wanted to share, myself and Elisa Pilati, to share some of the breakdown for smart bond funds, bond work, and capital reserve. Bernadette, you know, is that something we can share on the screen? Do we plan to do it that way or just discuss it? You're muted.
The only thing I have for this screen, Mr. Bossy, are the pictures you sent me of the pool area and the fence. I don't have anything else.
Okay. The topic was really to talk about the bond items that we've suggested for you to put, including phase 6.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, James, 1 second. Did you, I think you all got that with your packets on Friday? It was broken down? The recommendations?
Yeah, that's
It
what I'm
was
looking for.
a horizontal landscape piece of paper with all of, yep.
3
Lisa's showing it
categories.
now.
Okay. On that sheet, it shows at the very top the smart bond funds. And Elisa and I were talking about the idea that we should maximize the expenditures to those areas that will help our district and our building, where the district office is, to expand that entrance so that it's a secure entrance. So we would do a secure vestibule similar to what all the schools have gotten. The thought was that would allow us to maximize the expenditure of those smart bond funds by doing that as the primary project. If we can also include, depending on how funds go, the security film on side windows, that could be considered as well. But those are the 2 things that would expend all of the smart bond funds with no need to spend money on other on the private schools in the community. The next category is bond items that we would include in phase 6. And it's a little different than we had discussed in the last meeting, only because we were able to put the district office vestibule in the smart bond. That freed up some funds to put other items back in the bond list that would have been there anyway, and actually parts of those were done in prior phases. So the rotunda brick we've already talked about, that would be for the brick facade that is coming off the wall. Same thing at the high school. So we would do the beach rotunda, and we'd also do the high school brick wall and continue that work. Also the generators, which you know about, we're still considering that phase 6. That's generators for beach and Manitowoc. Also, the abating the crawl space at Paul J. Ballou, we discussed that one already. That's still on the list for the bond work. And the last one was the spline and metal ceiling replacements at kitchens, closets, bathrooms, and classrooms. And that would be similar to what we've already done in some prior phases of the bond. So those are the bond items. The last 3rd category is capital reserve items. I can go into those as well.
James, can I cut you off for a second? I apologize.
No problem.
The last thing you just said about the ceiling replacements, well, I missed what you said. I'm sorry.
What that is we have areas in the schools that have spline ceilings or glued panels. And it does, it's old and original and in bad condition. The other issue with that is we can't access the ceiling to inspect plumbing or valves. But the other issue is that anytime we need to run network wires for anything from access points to wire, anything, phones or whatever, we can't get up there without damaging the ceiling every time.
And is that in a specific building or is that everywhere?
It's some metal tin ceilings in every building, but I think there's also a key on a lot of classrooms in the Manitowoc building that still have spline ceilings.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I'd say half the work might be Manitowoc, the other half might be district-wide.
Sure.
Now to the capital reserve items. Those were replacing all the water fountains or the additional water fountains that were not done as part of phase 4 or 5 that we're still waiting for, as you know. Those were delayed because of COVID and manufacturing and change of model type and plumbing related issues. But it would be to do additional water fountains on other floors of the secondary schools or additional wings of the elementary schools. The other is to add the 8 air-conditioned mini splits in the main offices at Manitowoc and Okonock, so that they're the same as the other elementary schools and secondary. Then there was asphalt paving, staff parking lot, and kindergarten area at Bayview. At the high school, we talked about the deck and the railing replacement. We do have some photos that we'll show you for that. Then there was also the campus-style fencing at the high school around by the library. We have some photos of that as well to share. We also have renovating multiple bathrooms. That would be finishes only, not ADA. I have a couple more here. That's to replace the high school stage curtains. And the last one is the kitchen interior walk-in freezers and refrigerators to rehab them or replace them. So now back to these pictures. That pool deck from this photo doesn't look so bad, but if you advance through, you can see some details of sharp edges or deteriorating deck where we've patched it with concrete. So it's safer than it was because we've put concrete in many areas, which some of the, like there, you can see gray concrete. We've removed loose tile and we patched it in temporarily. There's multiple areas. Every time tiles come out, we patch the area with concrete. That's one of the posts for the railing, and the base under it is gray. That's where we patched it as well. That was loose tile in the past that we fixed. And those bases you're looking at that are blue, we rebuilt them already and they cracked again. So we're recommending a solution that's an all new deck with posts that insert into the deck instead of upright concrete partitions there or blocks. The other thing is where the railings are, it's a fixed aluminum rail all the way across. So when they have a first aid drill or a real life event where they have to remove someone from the pool, those railings are in the way of the full board. So I spoke to the coaches over there and the PE teachers. They like the idea of removing the rails, going with a chain or rope type post to post rail where it can be removed.
So James, this money pit is continuing. Is that correct?
You could say it that way.
Thanks. That's how I'll say it.
I think she did.
This pool deck is over 20 years old. It's probably the second deck that's there since the pool was built, and it's time for another one. That's really where we are with it.
James, that's the capital reserve portion, right?
So,
That's capital reserve, and that's new deck and new rails.
so I guess I had a couple questions, but can any of these be squeezed into the bond, right? Because I think this is a really good summary, and thank you very much. Some of the smaller guys, should they, because it just looks like the bond could have, 500,000 or so, up to 1.6 million of funds available, or what are you thinking as far as sequencing? Would you wait for the bond stuff to cycle through to see? Or
Well,
something like this deck looks like you'd need to do it sooner rather than later.
Yep. What I would say is that the design work that BBS or that the architect needs to do is the same regardless of whether it's capital reserve or bond. The difference is how we go about bidding it and things like that. But also, I'm not familiar with the timing for getting public approval for the capital reserve. So that maybe Elisa or Brenna can answer that part of it. But other than that, it's the same from a design standpoint. So I assume that there's a way to consider using bond funds if we get to a point where there's funds left.
So James, I guess my question would be, it would depend on how the original pool project was written in the bond book.
Yep.
Whether this could even be considered as part of that original project. We would have to go back and look at the language of the bond book first and have council look at that and verify that we would be able to go that route. But as far as going up to state ed, I thought that Gary had said that the process was the same. It's just the funding is different, the funding stream.
That's true. I guess what I mean is if we're going to do the work, regardless of the funding source, we could initiate the design process the same.
Yeah, well, I guess my question was, can any of the smaller projects get pulled up above to utilize the 506 to 1.6 million overage? Or do you not want to wait till those bond projects flush through to get some of these done, right? So I guess it looks like we have money left in the bond. Should we be using that first?
Correct.
And then whatever we need to go out to the public for the second piece, we can go out then.
I guess that the answer is dependent upon if we go to a vote for the capital reserve to be approved, can you withdraw items that were already approved from the vote? So if the public says yes to doing the pool deck, let's say, but then we have money left in the bond, can it go back to bond?
I guess what I was saying, can we take some of them out and not go out and not put them on the public list?
I thought the timing for the capital reserve was soon, though, that you wanted to get these out. So I don't know if we have the time for that.
I'm wondering if I'm misunderstanding, Mr. McGinnis, are you asking if it's a bond project, then we can make the decision more or less this evening and commit to it and move forward with it. If it's a capital reserve project, then we are looking at going through the process of a vote and then subsequently following through the protocols. Is that what the question is?
I guess I'm saying right now, it looks like a range for the vote of 1.6 to $2.1 million, but we have money left over in the bond. Should we be using the bond money before we ask the taxpayers to approve this again? Or what would be the plan for the bond money if we got approval to do all this stuff?
I think the difficulty here, Mr. McGinnis, is the timing. If we wait to see what the final costs are of the next bond phase is, then we won't be going out to the public until next May for capital. So that's the dilemma.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. We can look
So,
into that.
so
though.
I think the question it really is whether we're covered under the bond. Whether we have the ability to do this under the bond, and if not, then we'll have to make a decision on the capital.
We'll look into that.
Thank you.
And
And
then
James,
my
you
other
said-
question would be, on a prior list, there was some issue with some windows. Is that going to be addressed offline? Sooner, I guess?
Yep, I met with BBS. We went on the roof. We looked underneath. We're recommending a replacement of one section of the windows, maybe two, at Bayview. At Paul J. Ballou, we're not finding the same exact severity of any leaks. So I think BBS right now, last we left off, maybe a week and a half, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, was they were going to provide us with some design ideas and cost estimates. I don't have them yet, but those are the types of things that could fit within bond with some of the balance you're talking about there, but we don't have the numbers yet. If they're low enough, it could be an annual budget item. We don't have the exact figure yet, though, on that. But you're right, that is something else.
I just didn't know if they were more urgent, that they had to get done sooner rather than later. So,
What we found is that at Ballou, they seem to be less urgent. Really, they haven't been leaking. But it doesn't mean that there's something still not present, depending on some rainfall, some wind direction. Bayview, they seem to be more prevalent. So we're going to see what the costs are, how quickly we can act, whether there are vendors we can secure immediately, and we'll go from there. So once I have more information, I definitely think by the next B&G meeting, I'll have some information for you.
all right, cool. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I got one more for you. I'm sorry.
Sure.
So this would be at the third pool deck being put in?
Since the original construction of the high school.
Now, do we know, is this normal wear and tear, about 20 years, or are we considering a new design, new type of material so that in another 20 years, we don't have to go through this again?
I'm going to venture to guess that a deck might last longer than 20 years if it's a perfect installation. This job did not go so well 20 years ago. And it might have been that the contractor did it wrong a little bit with the base thin set, or it might have been that the concrete sub base was too loose to grab it properly. We don't know yet, but I spoke to BBS about the idea that when we do the demo, if we do this job, we'll have to treat the deck so it has a better surface to adhere the new deck to, the new tile to.
No surprise to hear that you already have that kind of thought process. So good job again.
Thanks. On the agenda, it also talks about the pool liner. Just to give you an update, we are going to drain the pool on Easter break. That's when that contractor did agree to come back, work on those issues they think might be causing the problem, and then we will refill the pool and see if the problem repeats itself. That's what we'll know at that point. So I'm not 100% confident what they do will solve it, but we should be in a better spot to answer the question about, is it going to be good or is it not going to be good? In the meantime, where we did have the bubbles in the bottom, I had some custom metal plates made, some weighted plates that we painted to kind of match the bottom of the pool. They're laid down flat now. We can run full contests and events in the building. it's been okay. It's a temporary Band-Aid, but it's working. Next topic was the disposition of the Macera property. We had talked about some of the use of the building, some of the expenses, the landscaping, what we maintain there. If there's any topics you want to bring up, let me know.
James, I'm sorry.
You're still muted.
Yep. I don't mean to interrupt, but we need to go back and decide as part of the capital projects or bond, the fencing along the Higby Lane Library property, Montauk Highway.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Do you have the photos? So along Montauk Highway and the library, I took some photos of the old fencing that's there currently. And it's rotted, it's falling apart. We've gotten through as many years as we can with it. It's probably about 18, 20 years old, but it was only cedar or pine wood, or the back rail was probably cedar, and it's just falling apart. So we've talked about different examples of what it could be. I believe that Mrs. Burns shared with you some designs. That's the one I was looking at there. There's black ornamental fence, there's picket options, there's masonry piers. We could do a combination that includes piers with pickets between them. We have estimates that seem to be lower than the original plan, which is good. So we just have to decide on what type of fencing to move forward with so we can start the design process and get something ordered.
Is that white fencing the PVC, James?
Yes, it's all the white's PVC, and all the black ones you see are either aluminum or they're iron or steel.
It should be something like the white in that style, with more like the picket than the, my opinion, than the.
I spoke with architect about keeping or having masonry or brick piers, and then also using pickets between them. So kind of a combination of what Central Islip has. If you can skip to the Central Islip photo, you can see what that one right there that has the piers in the black. One before that, there you go. So that could be that type of pier or similar with white picket between them, and that could be good as well. One of my concerns is people hop over the fence and pickets tend to get broken, where this style fence would be less likely to get broken. We could also have the ability to replace sections if that ever happened down the road. So if we got a picket style, I'd want to buy a few extras that we would store and have available down the road.
I mean, aesthetically, the white PVC is probably the most attractive.
Thing is, if kids try to climb that,
of course,
they can't fit their foot through it and it breaks and all that stuff. That's what I'm thinking about long term. But I do like the way it looks as well. What I thought was important is if we can try to keep those masonry piers, I think that looks very stately. It looks very campus-like. I think that might be nice. So it's really up to the committee to how to move forward here.
We need
can
to.
we get quotes on both? Can we get quotes on both?
We can't
hear you, Mrs. LaRosa.
I like the white.
Mrs. LaRosa does not like the wrought iron, Mr.
On
Boss.
it in sign language.
So if we go for the white picket, Mr. McCann, are you asking for the white picket and the white picket with the brick, what are they called, James? Not mine.
Pillars or piers?
Right, correct.
Are those the two you're asking for? I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yes.
I guess I'd like to see some kind of a picture. I'm not quite sure how the white picket will look next to the piers, and of course, a cost estimate for both.
Now, what would happen if we do the brick? If we could add like an LED light on top of each one that goes across, is that something we'd be interested in?
There's no electric over that way now to add that, but anything's possible for a price.
Oh, did I say LED? I was actually thinking solar, but
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do make those caps. Sometimes I worry about the youth in the neighborhood messing with anything we put in. But anything, BBS has acknowledged anything, every variety can be done. And any of these versions that we've asked about all look good. So none are really better than the other. It's a personal opinion.
So will the white, the PVC, will that withstand the wear and tear, particularly down in that area? It tends to be a little bit windier. It'll be okay.
I don't know if we want to try to put a few more pedestrian openings there, that if there was a reason to have an opening that people can pass through, that would prevent all the people climbing over it. But on the other hand, I know we want to lock our campuses, but we're only talking about a 4 or 5 foot fence. It's not a high security fence. It's more decorative. So
Right. So aesthetically, that is, I mean, my personal preference too, but I'm concerned about the longevity. Because the PVC, it's great in your backyard, but you're talking about it, you know, this is more or less, we need a commercial grade fencing there.
Yeah, I don't particularly think PVC points, whether it's a flat picket or a square picket, will withstand people climbing over it. They're going to end up bending or breaking. So we either, if we're worried about that occasion where people are going to climb over it, it's going to get damaged, where the metal one won't. But on the other hand, if we provide some openings, then they can get through without doing that. So,
Are there any openings today?
the only openings is one over by the library. That's really into the chain link section to get into those fields. But along Montauk Highway, no. There's a one vehicle gate, and that's always closed and locked unless we have an event going on that we need to open it. So there really isn't an option. A person walking or with a bike on Montauk Highway can't get onto the property without climbing over, and that's what they do. And 90% of the problems we have are from there.
Do we lock the gate by the library?
We lock the one by the library at certain times in the evening, and early in the morning they reopen it. So it's generally open over there. But so that's not where we have problems over by Higby Lane. The problems are on Montauk Highway.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
What would the logic be then? I mean, if it's not a security fence, as we all know, what's the logic between not having an opening? Like, it seems like that would make more.
It deters the people that aren't willing to hop a fence to not go over the fence. I mean, people that are going to do it are going to do it. I mean, you can try to put a 6-foot fence there, then it's hard to get over.
Yeah, I was going to ask what's the cost differential between the 4 and the 6?
Yeah, I think the handout you might have has all the costs broken out on page 2 of the different options. It shows you the incremental cost for piers and the vinyl and the steel, all that.
James, are there any of the options in steel but in white that don't look too cheap?
Yeah, that's exactly
that
right.
might wear better?
Yeah, I asked that exact thing. There was nothing normally produced that's white for the metal, but you can get them painted. I don't have a number for that.
It's mostly a picket style today, and you showed some broken areas, but how has that survived over the years? It's a pretty old fence, isn't it? So if that survived, wouldn't you think the other one would survive?
It would last longer than the wood one, because the wood ones was just nailed pickets. The vinyl one would be stronger than that, but it still wouldn't withstand frequent climbing over. So
I guess
yes, it would be
my
better.
question is, we have it today, and are we experiencing that problem? Because you look like there was only a handful of areas that might have been broken. So is it pretty much held up over the years?
We've replaced hundreds of them over the years. Every year we replace 40, 50 of them. And the reason it was more difficult is it's a scalloped shape, which means every picket is a different size. And we're not replacing the whole section. We're replacing individual pickets. So we had to get custom anyway. So if we were to go pickets, I would only recommend it's flat top, even size spacing everywhere. But the thing about the picket style fences is you can't replace individual pickets. It's a section at a time, 8-foot sections.
Okay.
Sections.
Makes sense.
So we'll get a few more options.
Are there any other alternatives that are more sturdy than that look more along the picket?
Well,
theme, but maybe made out of metal or something? I don't know.
It seems to be you got metal or aluminum, and it can be a flat rail top or a pointed top on the metal, or there's vinyl. And vinyl is either pickets or it's flat top, solid wall or lattice. So it's really a residential look or a commercial look. And the residential look is the picket, is the white, and the commercial look is the metal. That's what you see throughout Long Island. So it's really a matter of what you're looking for. And I just would recommend that if the board ends up deciding on a PVC picket, there should be an opening accounted for. Otherwise, they're going to damage it again. But for longevity and lower maintenance, it's the metal.
Okay.
You look at the fence, maybe an option, they just put it over in Sagatos Manor. It's wood, but I think it's a style that you're talking about, the flat. It looks sturdier. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that too. The other option that's more money is you could do a half masonry wall between the piers, and then the fencing is only 2 feet tall or 3 feet tall. And then someone could climb up on the masonry, hop over, and probably not damage it. Not that we want to encourage that, but that's a lot more expensive to do masonry wall the whole way.
Why don't we just put step ladders there?
Yeah. And if the thought is maybe metal fencing with white color, I'll dig a little deeper and see if we can find a manufacturer that does make that. It must exist somewhere.
And not just the color, but just the whole style of the picket looks nicer than bars. Iron bars just isn't appealing.
Yep. Okay, I'll find some other options before we proceed and we'll share them.
Okay, now proceed.
Okay.
And just so you all are aware, there is going to be an exec session after the meeting. I've sent you the link. So when we're done here, we will all sign off and then come back into exec session. Okay, I'm sorry. So Miss Sarah, disposition of the Miss Sarah property. So James, maybe you could just bring everybody up to speed as far as what maintenance is currently being done, you know, to make sure that the property continues to be presentable and the building is cared for.
Once we got to the point where we knew it wasn't going to be occupied anytime soon, this is last year, and we've been doing the same thing since then till today. And that's that we have a custodian check the building once a week for 1 hour for leaks, broken glass, any problems in the building, boiler room, crawl areas, the roof, whatever it takes. We also have a maintenance worker who's a heating or boiler person, check it once a week. On regular hours, they'll stop by there when they're en route to another building, just to see that the boilers are working properly during the heating season. We're running those boilers minimally. We have the temperature set very low. The building's maybe 45, 50 degrees, just enough to prevent it from pipes from freezing, mainly so that we don't have a high bill for natural gas prices, for gas utility costs. We also have water to the building still there on, but it doesn't run much water. That's to maintain the boiler. And then we also make sure when it gets cold like this that we run a faucet a little bit so the RPZ valve doesn't freeze. We check on that a little bit. There's heat tracing tape in there as well, so nothing freezes on that. We clean up any spills or cobwebs or insects because a vacant building is going to get bugs in it faster than any other building. So we go through there occasionally. When we see a lot, we get them cleaned up. Our grounds crew does still mow all the grass in the growing season. Weed whack all the edge lines, and then remove litter or debris around the property. There are occasionally people that walk around and leave garbage and McDonald's and stuff all over. So we have to go back there and pick that up. And also branches and tree pieces that fall down from the top that get left there. And last thing is we do have security that still checks the property as part of their regular routine. That's about all we do right now.
Running irrigation in the growing season still? I know we talked about that.
There's an irrigation system there, which we did not, I don't believe we ran that in the last spring. We didn't run it this last spring, but we would have to consider whether that would be turned back on for this current season coming up, at least by May, maybe.
James, we were sent a document, I guess that was from our insurance carrier about securing the outside of the building with plywood now, once it's been vacant more than 6 months. Is that something that we now have to do?
Well, I haven't heard of that being required, but maybe it was recommended by your insurance company. I didn't see that, but if it was, I put together some estimates for Mrs. Burns about what it would cost to buy all that plywood, all the 2x4, 2x6.
Didn't I read that? Did anybody else read that, or was I dreaming that?
No, we sent that to you. That was
Okay.
the nicer recommendations, yeah.
No, that was
Okay.
So was that a recommendation or a requirement?
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at it
I
again.
read it
I
as a
looked at it as a
requirement.
recommendation.
I read it as a requirement of continuing to insure the property. So should something happen, we would, be compensated if we took those steps. And if we don't take those steps, then it's on us. That's how I read it. I could be wrong. Maybe Tom could advise us more on that.
Yeah, I think we need to see a list of exactly what the minimum is that we need to do in terms of insurance requirements, in terms of what we, think is appropriate. And then, let's get that going. So I guess at this point, obviously the vote for the sale failed, and we need to, as we've said all along, go back to the drawing board at this point. As you all know, and to let the public know, a few days ago, Mrs. Burns and I independently were approached by someone that would like to possibly lease the property and do work on the building. This is not even in the preliminary stages yet. So we're going to have to discuss it and see if it's a possibility. The potential tenant will have to look at the building. There's really a lot of steps that might have to go forward, and then decide whether we want to pursue that option or pursue another sale or some other approach.
Okay. Would you like me to continue to the next topic?
Sure.
Eagle Scout project. We do have a local resident, student named Matthew Scheid, I think it's pronounced.
Scheid, that's correct.
He requested to put an enhanced landscaping area and a walk-up path to the memorial for Vietnam at the high school. He and I have been communicating about what would work, and he's come up with a nice plan. I asked him to provide a project summary to the district, which he had ironed out very well with how they would donate and what they would do and how it would look. And he gave me some drawings, and it's well thought out. And I think it would work well. I did express to him that whatever project it would be, he should have a long range plan to maintain if something's damaged, so that it doesn't become a chore for the district to maintain. And he would be coming back once a year or more often to check the pavers, make sure everything's sitting well, no problems, and so forth. So I think it was shared with you some photos or drawings of what he'd like to do. It's just a paver path that goes to the memorial. And I think that it's something that we could allow to happen.
Yeah, I think it would look really good the way it was laid out. So I think it's a really good idea.
Good.
And I'd like to compliment Matthew for, he did a really nice proposal, I think, very professionally done. And I think he's a credit to the Boy Scouts. He's going to be a terrific Eagle Scout. So we're very proud of him.
What year is he?
I think he's a senior.
I think a senior, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great project. I definitely support it. I'm sure. And Mr. Compitello, maybe you could weigh in from the veterans' viewpoint, but I'm sure that the Legion and the veterans would be quite happy with it. You're muted, Tom. Give us a thumbs up. All right.
The last topic is the EPC solar energy project. Last month, I think you approved the project to move forward, but there was a question about the inverters and the cost of that replacement. So I just figured I'd touch on that, give you a little more information. The whole project might have roughly, I think it's 40 inverters. Those inverters are what convert the voltage from AC to DC, basically. And the inverters have a lifespan of an expectation of 20 years, but the warranty is 10 years. So they may fail between 10 and 20 years, and maybe not every one of them. So hypothetically, and I have some write-ups from the solar PV company, Noresco, as well as support from ECG, that if we assume that maybe half of them fail in the course of year 10 to year 20, we're talking about 20 units that would be replaced. The cost of the material is about material and replacement about $5,000 each. Now the revenue for each year from having the panels would be over $250,000 a year of net proceed to the district. So if in 1 year, worst case scenario, all 20 of them failed, or half the units failed before year 20, we're looking at basically a menial amount of money over the picture to replace them. So 5,000 each. The other way we thought of it is, let's say 3 failed each year from year 10 on. We're still talking about maybe $150,000 or $100,000 to replace them during that, or it's 100,000 for those to replace them. So if every year it happened, it would be a small piece of what the income is every year. And there are many that last beyond year 20 years. And you could have some fail before year 10, and those would be covered as far as part of the warranty. The other thing that was mentioned is some districts, very few, or companies have decided to pre-purchase backup inverters and put them in a basement, and so they're available one day. The problem with that idea for this is the technology changes at such a rate that we don't know what it'll be in 10 years. The whole system might be obsolete. Who knows? So you're better off waiting until the day at which 1 or 2 or 5 of them fail, and then you replace those with whatever's on the market at that time. Am I beating a dead horse in this?
No, I think that the technology in this area is going to continue to progress, possibly significantly. So I wouldn't want to lock us into today's efficiency when 10 years from now can be really significantly better.
Yep. And the cost of those inverters is expected to go down as we go on, or get more efficient, so you can do 2 for 1
Right.
or 1 for 2 instead. So, okay, good. Any other questions on the PV project?
Nope.
Okay. That's all I have.
James, thanks for your team to getting the schools to where they are for tomorrow morning. I drove around town today, and they look great, but I can imagine what they looked like last night. So thank you.
Yeah, we're just lucky that it didn't go into freezing temperatures before morning. That would have been a real tough morning this morning if it was all frozen. So we lucked out a little bit with that. We could push the snow around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bossi. Okay, so we're going to go, can I have a motion to adjourn to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Have a good evening, everybody. We will see you on